So Tiffany asked me to wake you up. So again, good morning. Good morning! I enjoyed very much the start yesterday evening. And, but Tiffany's right. The program is extremely loaded with up-to-date information on Pompe disease, and also the latest developments will be presented later on Sunday. There's a lot to digest, certainly for people who were here for the first time or who had a diagnosis very recently. So I decided not immediately dive in the deep caverns of science, but keep it very, very simple. So having said this, can I have the next slide? Or I can do that myself. Okay. So here we are in San Antonio. Who's here for the first time? You see? A significant crowd. I know San Antonio a little bit better, but I was just interested to see what Wikipedia would say about San Antonio. Now, can I read? Yeah, I can read it here. So it's a city in the US state of Texas. Now, well, we have experienced that yesterday evening. Then, you didn't know probably. It's the 24th largest metropolitan area in the US. Well, maybe so. It's the third largest metropolitan area in Texas. So the other ones, probably Houston, Austin, Dallas? I don't know. But we are counting down, 24th, third. Second, most populous city in Texas. And now the number first. It's the number first city in the world where Pompe disease cares. So having said this, the title of my presentation, Pompe disease, some aspects of the disease, and then they asked me to go into the future. And I take here the opportunity to thank the Acid Maltase Deficiency Association and the International Pompe Association very much for having invited me. And I really admire all the efforts and investments they're continuously making to build a strong Pompe community, because that's really what counts and what has done it in the past and will do it in the future. Oh yeah, here at the, I have to explain, that's my beloved wife in an air balloon. She's trying to find her way into the future. Don't worry, I made the picture, so I was in the same balloon and we both returned back to Earth safely. Okay, I decided to first explain some of the terminology to prevent any confusion later. Okay, the disease has different names. Normally, usually, most often, it's called Pompe disease, and that refers to a pathologist, a Dutch pathologist, who was among the first to describe this disease at first. Then the other name you will see often is glycogenosis type 2, and that refers to the storage of glycogen in this disease. And then there are two other names, acid alpha-glucosidase deficiency and acid maltase deficiency, AMDA. And that's referring to the enzyme missing that is causing Pompe disease. Then we go to the other panel, the missing enzyme. It's called acid alpha-glucosidase. And to explain that, the glucosidase refers to the glucose that is released by this enzyme. And then there are two different forms of glucose. It's an alpha and a beta form. And in this case, it's the alpha form that is released, so that makes it alpha-glucosidase. And the enzyme works best in an acidic environment. So that's why it's called acid alpha-glucosidase. And this enzyme is able to release glucose from different compounds. And one of these compounds is a sugar. It's called maltose. And maltose is 2 glucose units, and that can be split, and it releases 2 glucoses. Then the abbreviation GAA, that's a bit funny. Why is it GAA and not AAG? In the 1970s, genes were going to be discovered. And then a committee decided to give every gene an abbreviated name. And it always starts first with the function, which is the release of glucose, so that the G, glucose, then it says specifically in an acidic environment, that's the A from acidic, and then the alpha is the form of glucose. And then you will also see the RH, GAA, and the CO, GAA, and the RH is recombinant, GAA. I'll be using the abbreviation now. And it's recombinant because people have been manipulating the gene in order to enable production of acid alpha-glucosidase for therapeutic purposes. So it's a manipulated form of GAA. And the CoAA is something different. But now more names are coming up, because now enzyme replacement therapy is on the market, and companies are used to give their own name to these recombinant human enzymes, depending on the producer. So we have Zanavi Genzyme, they call it Al-glucosidase alpha, and that stands for myozyme. That's probably better known to you, or Lumizyme. Now Lumizyme and myozyme are structurally not exactly the same product, but they come very close, and they are both called Al-glucosidase alpha, and they are produced in a cell line which is called CHO. Then the new enzyme introduced by Genzyme is called Al-glucosidase alpha, and it's on the market under the name Nexviazyme in the United States and Nexviazyme in other countries, in Europe, I think. Then the other producer is Amicus Therapeutics, AT-GAA, Amicus Therapeutics GAA, and it's called SIPA glucosidase alpha, and it's an acid alpha-glucosidase with bis-mannose-6-phosphate. That doesn't say very much to you, but the bis-mannose-6-phosphate is important to make the product function optimally. And it's on the market under the name Pombility. And then this enzyme, Pombility, is administered in combination with miglustat, and that's used to stabilize the enzyme. Then we have the recombinant human at the bottom, recombinant human, GAA, also the CO, GAA, and the CO stands for codon optimized. That means that people have been changing, making variations in the genetic code to produce a recombinant human GAA that can easily be produced and may function better in therapeutic applications. Some more about terminology. There will be many speakers here from different countries, and they may not all be using the same terminology to describe the patients. Let's see where I am. 50 years ago, when I started my research on Pompe disease, the clinical spectrum was divided in classic infantile, at the left, far left, childhood, and adult Pompe disease. And there was even a term for patients in between. It was called juvenile Pompe disease. I have skipped it here. The classic infantile is the most severe, with symptoms presenting shortly after birth and cardiac involvement. Then the childhood, I have here drawn a line, but it's, I don't know, at 16. But there's overlap between all these forms. So the childhood here is onset from 0 to 16, and then the adult, in this terminology, in this graph, starts in adulthood. So this is the way how it was divided. So you could say you have adult Pompe disease, you have childhood Pompe disease, and you have classic infantile Pompe disease. With the introduction of enzyme replacement therapy, also this terminology was replaced. I know why, but that's complicated to explain. But nowadays it's called IOPD. It could be a beer or whatever, but it is infantile onset Pompe disease, and it stands for classic infantile Pompe disease. So the two are absolutely the same. And then, well, all the rest is called LOPD, independent whether it starts at birth or whether at the age of 80. I think it's very confusing, but this is the way it is. Patients with LOPD do not have cardiac involvement, as far as we know. This is about the terminology. Then we go to the disease mechanism, very, very, very briefly. So all products and processes in the human body are controlled by genetic information. The genetic information is encrypted in a chemical molecule, a chemical compound, which is called DNA. Desoxyribonucleic acid, doesn't matter. Whether you talk about DNA or genetic information, it's the same. Now, based on this genetic information, the acid alpha-glucosidase is produced within the cells of the body. And the acid alpha-glucosidase, if you go one line lower, is important for the breakdown of glycogen to glucose. Now, the glycogen is this compound at the left. It's a branch structure, and all the green dots, it's glucose. And when the acid alpha-glucosidase acts on it, it's split, and the glucose is released. Then we go to the problem in Pompe disease. Pompe disease is caused by defects, mistakes, also called mutants, variants, in the genetic code. So I have painted 2 letters in red to indicate that there's something wrong with the genetic code. Now, if the genetic code is not correct, then of course it has its effect on the production of acid alpha-glucosidase. Can be totally blocked, can be partially blocked, it may lack optimal function, etc. Now, once the acid alpha-glucosidase doesn't work properly, the glycogen can't be degraded properly and starts to accumulate. And the accumulation of the glycogen is causing the problems, the physical problems, the muscle weakness mainly. Okay, then of course, the most important, can Pompe disease be cured? Which way to go? The answer is the optimistic way. Not yet. We just have to wait, but there will be a cure. Current therapies prolong and improve life, but do not cure. But you always have to remain optimistic, because the brain drives the body, as Ryan Colburn told me yesterday. I like this story. He's right. He's right. If you think you're sick, you're sick. But if you are sick, you can still think you're not sick, but you're still sick. Something like that. So the optimistic way. This is a patient message on the AMDA website. With timely diagnosis, treatment and support, Pompe disease patients can still live long, productive life. And I think that's the way to go. And the other quote on the website we have seen yesterday evening by Robert Goddard. It is difficult to say what is impossible today. Can we cure or can't we cure? We don't know. If you dream of it yesterday, there's hope for today, and tomorrow we may have a therapy. That's the optimistic way. What are the ways to interfere with this disease or to intervene the problems? This slide you've seen before, you can look at it at different levels. So there's a problem with the genetic information. There is a wrong letter, two long letters here. Can this be corrected? You know, if you have a text in writing, you can edit your text. So the technology to correct the letters, the genetic code, is called genetic editing. Genetic editing. And the technology is coming up and is being applied in certain suitable conditions, but I think it's far from being operative for Pompe disease. So yeah, let's just wait and see. But the other thing, of course, you can do is replace the genetic information. So supply the correct information. So you add a gene, the correct gene. That's called gene therapy. Then what can you do about the production of acid alpha-glucosidase? We all know, because you can administer a properly functioning acid alpha-glucosidase intravenously. And that is called enzyme replacement therapy. And the challenge for the future is, of course, to have the therapy, but to make it work even better and better and better. And companies are working on that. Then at the lowest level, there is the storage of glycogen. Can the storage of glycogen be prevented or limited? Maybe there's a way by reducing the synthesis of glycogen. And since glycogen is being degraded by acid alpha-glucosidase, it is called a substrate of the enzyme. It's a little bit complicated. But then therapy, if you want to limit the influx of glycogen, is called substrate reduction limit therapy. Okay, now the answer to all these questions, I think they are addressed in the conference program, so I'm not going in any detail. Oh, that's my beloved wife again at the left, in a different environment, but going for the same purpose, you know. Look for the future and see what you find. Then about the program. So this morning, when I stop, first we will hear about the natural history of Pompe disease versus the history with ERT. So all the up-to-date information on the effects of ERT and how it can be improved. And then the rest of the day is focused on monitoring patients, managing patients, and later in the afternoon, a lot of time is allotted to the patients for presenting their questions and the issues. And it's really meant to be an open discussion, not the levels like a physician and the patient or whatever, but just be together and try to solve and interact. Then on Sunday, it starts with the IPA Erasmus survey, the Pompe registry, and other databases like the Pompe variant database. And so it's focusing on the use of these databases to improve diagnosis, management, and to help develop new therapies. Then we have the industries presenting on the next generation's therapy. So the very, very latest developments on enzyme replacement therapy. We have the gene therapy, and then it ends with the session on the future research. This is all I wanted to say. Enjoyed the conference very much, and if you have questions, come up with your questions. Thank you.